whole bunch of different things. Today we're going to be talking about brain systems and how they regulate sleep, and then we're going to talk about what influences sleep, and then after that we will be talking about biohacking the sleep, and supplements you can do, and sleeping with a partner, what you should be doing with that. And if you stick till the end of this live stream or this video, then I'm going to share with you what I do personally and with my clients. So, what should we know about sleep? Well, sleep is really dependent on the reticular activation system. It's a part of the back of your brain that essentially controls what is salient to you. It filters out all the irrelevant things. So if I were like in a noisy restaurant right now and having a conversation with you, it would be able to just pick up on what you're talking about, what our conversation is, without having to listen to all the clank and chatter and people eating all around us. That's what it does. It also controls our consciousness. So our consciousness of being awake and unconsciousness. It will control our fight or flight response, our ability to focus on things, a few other things that are more related to GI motility, pain, self-perception, but the one that we're focusing on is wakefulness and sleep, particularly sleep. Some interesting things to note about the RAS is that it promotes wakefulness through orexin and histamine, and focus through dopamine and glutamate. Pretty sweet. So what do we do to biohack the reticular activating system, right? So you want your prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, essentially to be able to control everything, and the reticular activation system to filter out what doesn't need to be filtered, right? So you don't want the thoughts going on during the day that should be naturally happening while you're awake to be happening while you're getting ready for sleep or going to sleep. So there's a few things that we're going to talk about here that really play a paramount role in this. When you're first awake, when you first wake up in the morning, it's important to be productive, whether it's just simple things. It doesn't have to be like you have to be the ultimate productive person. You just have to be productive, be doing things. It could be changing your laundry, doing dishes. It could be reading a book. It's just, you can't just like lie around for the first 4 hours. This is because the frontal lobe and the RAS, that connection, it requires you to do things during the day, or else your brain will be thinking about that at night. It's pretty crazy. You need that to calm it down. A second thing that is really important is to reduce and calm down negative emotions. So that's best done, I'd say, with a meditative practice. Now, meditative practice doesn't necessarily have to be like meditation. Meditation is great, mindfulness meditation, but you could do yoga and Tai Chi. You can just do a meditative walk and be mindful of the things that are going around. You know, you could do dancing and just be aware of your body. You know, you could participate and play with someone and have a meditative experience like that. But it's really to work out those negative emotions and to clear that, because what happens in the frontal lobe is every time you're working on meditation or those kind of meditative practices, you're able to better control the reticular formation, the reticular activation system. Now, when negative emotions take control, then all the crazy talk that comes from the primitive part of your brain essentially comes up into the forefront of your consciousness, which it doesn't need to be and can keep you awake. So that makes your frontal lobe weaker in its ability to control the RAS. So what you want to do is make the frontal lobe strong enough to be able to filter out and turn off so you can get in wakefulness, sleep appropriately. All right, so I want to talk about next, which is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's a hilarious name. You know, they call it the pacemaker of the circadian rhythm. I had a little TM here just because I thought it was hilarious. But what it does is it is your ability. It's a part of your brain that's able to pick up on sensors like light cues and different Zeitgebers. We'll get into Zeitgebers in a second, but the most important one is light. And light comes into the eye, it hits the retina, that sends signals to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then you get different behaviors like wakefulness and etc. So in training the suprachiasmatic nucleus to know when it's light out and when it's dark out is paramount. And we'll get to that in just a second because you'll see how it plays out. So Zeitgebers and cues. Zeitgebers is a German word for biological cues. Essentially, they are internal processes that happen based on external cues. So, for example, when you wake up in the morning, the sun comes up. Like that typically happens around the same time. Like sunrise and waking that would be a cue to it. We're going to get into all the cues that I've researched that I think relate to cues. It's important to note that Zeitgebers that are on a 24-hour light cycle or a 24-hour cue cycle. And now I think it's a good time to talk about what are the different types of cues. The first category I would put is light intensity and wavelength. So getting bright light during the morning and day and reducing your light intensity in the evening is great to entrain that system, that suprachiasmatic nucleus, to know what's going on. So following the sunlight patterns in your area. So based on what time of year it is, the sunlight patterns are going to be different. The sun will either be higher in the day and will either stay along in the visual spectrum for a longer time, or it won't, depending on your area. Moonlight can also affect it. So every month, every 4 weeks, we have a lunar cycle, and that affects our circadian rhythm. Other things that affect it are just our manufactured lights, such as blue lights with our phones. And that, you can't just be you can't depend your life on blue light or blue light devices. If you do that, you're going to be stuck up all night. What it does, blue light, is it tells the suprachiasmatic nucleus not to produce melatonin. It suppresses that melatonin synthesis. Melatonin is super important. It's not only just a hormone that gets your whole, that jumpstarts your whole circadian cue at night, but it's also an antioxidant and has like so many benefits to it. And if you're not producing that, your mitochondria are going to be poor producers of energy. Another part of Zeitgebers are digestion. So when you intake food or fluid or even supplements, like the fluid type and the fluid amount really take a part into what is going to start a cue or not. So at the end of the day, we have a reflex, which makes us want to chug water before we go to bed. If you were to do that reflex at let's say, waking up in the middle of the night, it may switch your circadian rhythm. It's paramount to eat during the day when the sun is up and our metabolic systems are attuned to hunting and gathering and socializing, and cutting that out once the sun goes down. Because we have so many amazing technologies to allow us to stay up beyond when the sun goes down, it really conflicts what evolution has allowed us to do for at least 400 million years of being around here. At least the 300,000 years of being a Homo sapien. What else we got? Alcohol is a big thing that can influence it, of course. Caffeine or caffeinated beverages can also influence it. It's kind of important to drink your coffee in the morning if you're going to drink caffeine. The next part about Zeitgebers, I would put it in a category of called movement. So that's like exercise and socializing, even sex or having orgasms. It's important to keep that stuff during times of the day when it's healthy to have those fluctuations in cortisol. So exercise at the same time every day if you can. Keep social interaction during the day and keep it routine if you can. Have sex and good quality sex and whatever around the same time every day to train that. Uh, you don't want to stimulate your brain cognitively in the evening. You want to be winding down your brain. uh, you don't want to be bringing more thoughts into thinking because remember that brings back the whole uh, activation of this whole system, and we want to keep it nice and focused in the way that we want. We talked a little bit about demographics before when I was mentioning uh, when the sun hits you. So geomagnetism, it plays a role. It hasn't been studied a whole lot, but we know it does play a role. Depending on where you are on the globe and how much magnetism is there, it could also be with elevation, although we only have low quality research on this so far. So I'm not going to further elaborate on because I really don't have too much to say. Temperature plays a big role, starting off the day nice and cold and getting warmer throughout the day into a colder night. Just think of how a day would go. Like if you didn't have the luxuries of a home and being able to control your environment, what is the normal pattern of a day? A normal pattern is it starts off pretty cold. The sun comes up, it gets warmer throughout the day, sun goes down, it gets cold at night. If you follow that same kind of circadian process, you'll be able to entrain that suprachiasmatic nucleus to program itself, do those cues right. You could be, some research has shown that you could be more susceptible to circadian changes if you are a young woman. There's not a whole bunch of research on it, but I'm excited to see where that's going to go. And let's see. I want to talk a little bit about the hormones and neurotransmitters. I just want to cover briefly what hormones and neurotransmitters are really important. They all follow a circadian rhythm to them. So cortisol, it will be high in the morning and start to plateau and go down during the day. And then in the evening, get a lot lower. And that creates a wakefulness response. Same thing with orexin and histamine. Melatonin, vasopressin, IGF-1, and adenosine are all the opposite. So they are low during the day and high at night. That's why adenosine controls sleep pressure, IGF-1 controls your regenerative abilities, vasopressin holds in your urine so you can take that big gulp of water right before bed. Melatonin, we've obviously discussed that before. What else? So I want to get on to the next part of this whole thing. So we talked about what is the reticular activation system. We talked about the suprachiasmatic nucleus briefly and the Zeitgebers that control the cues and what time the suprachiasmatic nucleus knows what time it is. And now I think it's great that we should talk about what can disturb a circadian rhythm apart from not following those biological cues. So you can dissociate from them and kind of get away with them, but some things can really mess with it. Based on the research, shows that anesthesia can mess with it. Endotoxemia, so essentially having a leaky gut or smoking or getting a cut and a wound and getting like microsepsis, so lipopolysaccharides, things like flying, so hypoxemia, hypobarism, hypobaric, not hyperbaric, and jet lag, obviously, because you're pushing your whole circuit, makes it much harder for the suprachiasmatic to communicate with the hypothalamus to talk what time of day it is. Shift work. I don't work with clients who do shift work, and I highly encourage people, if they are having problems with sleep, to not be doing shift work. So what happens if you chronically ignore your circadian cues and you do not listen to them and you are stuck in a state of sleep disruption? So it's pulled from a study here. there's a lot of downsides to it. From here, you could see that circadian disruption can lead to gut microbiome dysregulation, to altered metabolism and immune system impairment and dysregulation. Your pancreas can become impaired. So a whole bunch of different metabolic issues. Increased sympathetic nervous system activity, so being pushed into a state of fight or flight, which leads to hyperglycemia, endocrine disruption, so your hormones are more dysregulated. You'll get fatter because adipose tissues, they're impaired. Your ability to form memories is impaired because of glucose disposal. Impaired ability to be satiated, whether that's with food or just pleasure in general. So you have a greater displeasure in life because of the leptin issues, and that will also lead to obesity because the leptin is intolerant or desensitized. And these are just based on the research, some examples of what can happen with a dysregulated circadian rhythm and not following these Zeitgebers, such as macular degeneration, bipolar cancer, depression, hormone imbalances, immune dysfunction, increased susceptibility to viral infections, insomnia, intestinal permeability, mitochondrial dysfunction, obesity, PD, schizophrenia, and seasonal affective disorder. Maybe some of them seem very intuitive to you, and I think it would be great to just go over this so you know, like, it's easy to draw these connections once you see them. So I want to talk about what you should be doing if you're sleeping with a partner. Now, research has been showing that if you sleep with a partner, it's important to synchronize your circadian rhythms together so you can sleep better together. Men and women, they have two different cycles. Men follow a 24-hour cycle where women follow a 30-day cycle. And that means that the time that they wake up is slightly different based on, so men will be the same in how they wake up every day, but women, they will change based on the cycle they are in, their menstrual cycle. So keeping that in mind, it's important to try to synchronize those two things together. So when you both sleep together, one of the most challenging things that can happen is if one of the partners is a night shift worker and they have completely opposite circadian rhythms. That really messes things up. Hormesis, we've discussed hormesis a whole lot. Hormesis is the ability of adding a little bit of stressor, so like a toxin or a exercise and movement, any kind of stressor to produce a greater beneficial effect. So exercise would be one of those things. Sauna is one of those things. You know, cold therapy, broccoli sprouts, the sulforaphane is a toxin. All those things are hormetic protocols. Now, if you're going to use hormetic tools, you have to time those appropriately because they produce antioxidant response enzymes, and those can mess with the circadian cues of cortisol. So doing those during the day and in the morning creates a better effect. They will less interfere with falling asleep at night. So people who do hyperbaric in the evening generally will be more stimulated after doing that. So it's important to be doing it in the morning. I know some other people that do better with hormesis in the end, but typically based on antioxidant response enzymes, because of how they turn on after hormesis, it would make the most logical sense to be doing it in the morning. So I promised you we were going to talk about what supplements may help with Zeitgebers, what you can do to kind of entrain them and get them going. Coffee, caffeine, that's great for in the morning. It also improves the cortisol response and the recycling of it if it's in the morning. I'm going to talk about what to do in the morning first. So forskolin is a great one, and horny goatweed or icarin. They both have PDE5 inhibitors and cyclic AMP receptor engagement. So that essentially turns on clock genes to get them going for the day. That's really cool. Nicotine is awesome. That has more dopaminergic and orexin-based properties. SAMe, selenium, and vitamin A have research on them that they could promote better Zeitgeber timing. In the evening, things that help with repair and those hormones would be like glycine. Glycine increases vasopressin levels and it increases IGF-1 levels. Same thing with, not same thing, but in the evening as well with melatonin. Melatonin triggers that it's just like the starting clock. It's like when a race starts and you have that shooting gun, this firing gun to start the race. That's essentially what it does. The extended release melatonin doesn't seem to really have that beneficial effect. It seems to be more of a antioxidant at that point, where lower doses of melatonin have that greater benefit. Passion flower has a lot of research on it as well for improving the circadian rhythm. And all right, so you guys stuck around till the end, and this is super awesome because I now get to share with you what I do with myself if I'm trying to reboot my circadian rhythm, if I've gotten out of line, or what I do with my clients if they are heavily misaligned with their circadian cues. This is a template that you may want to try or implement into your life. Everything I'm saying is nothing is medical advice. Everything that you do and change in your biology, you should discuss with your certified healthcare professional. And if they don't know about this kind of stuff, bring this video to them. That'd be very helpful for them. All right, so in the morning, first, you take a cold shower right after waking up to increase your metabolic rate. Then wake up with the sunrise and get morning sun on your body and your neck, where your thyroid is, on your back. There's a lot of receptors there too for your kidneys and in your eyes, so it goes directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. After that, take a bright light device or any kind of bright light device. I have the same type of bright light device that I'm using for recording, and I have another one that I use for recording videos with the whiteboard to wake yourself up, promote that daylight if you can't get it from the sun itself in your natural environment in the morning. You can take forskolin or horny goat weed if you're jet lagged or sleep deprived. Like if you're really jet lagged or you just went to bed at a weird time and you've done it over and over and you're trying to slowly move yourself back into the right time, waking up at the right time now, getting that back together. Eating protein and fats in the morning is really important for getting those back on. That kicks on the metabolic system. Drinking coffee or caffeine pills about 1 to 3 hours into just being awake enhances that cortisol response. Nicotine is okay if you're skipping breakfast and exercise. Exercise in the morning around 2 to 4 hours after waking. Now, it doesn't have to be like intense exercise, just moving the body, really just getting the body moving. Cardio can be great because it also has that beneficial effect on the heart. Really depends on your stress levels. Around noon, getting sun from Solar Noon. A great app for that is called D-Minder, D-M-I-N-D-E-R. There's a lot of other apps, or you can just find it online to find out what time solar noon is for you. It would be best to get full body exposure of it too. That way, the opsin receptors in your skin, all that melanin you have as well, is able to pick up on that sun. If you can eat a high fat, high protein diet during the day, meal during the day, that'd be cool. Be socially active during the day. So that's when you're like engaging your brain and all that kind of stuff, being able to get the brain to think of thoughts, to wear them out so the reticular formation isn't thinking about them later, and try to refrain from nicotine or caffeine and other stimulants, especially afternoon. In the afternoon, you can exercise if you didn't get to do it in the morning, or you can just go on like a light walk, or you could do some of your meditative practices there. in the evening, we want to eat a higher carb-rich diet. So those carbs can promote more production of tryptophan and serotonin, which will help us produce more melatonin, um, which will thus reduce our catecholamines like dopamine and norepinephrine, so we can calm down a little bit better. A great way to do this is without spiking your blood sugar, low glycemic foods, resistant starches, like my favorites like banana flour. Typically around 3 to 4 hours before bed while the sun is still up. All right. Watch the sunset and then don't eat after sunset. And then after sunset, block all the artificial light you can with like red glasses or whatever. Sauna is interesting because it is a hormetic tool, but it can also increase prolactin, which is a kind of like a oxytocin loving kind of goodish feeling hormone, which blunts the response of dopamine. So you could do that in the evening too. At night, so the sun's down, you've already eaten, you're already starting to block blue light, and you're wearing red glasses. You are not going to do anything cognitively stimulating. Like, you're not trying to think of new thoughts, you're not trying to create new ideas, you're just trying to have a more reflective kind of day. You can do more reductive kind of therapies, which would be great. That calms the mind down. A hot shower would increase the body temperature temporarily so you can get a body temperature decrease after the shower. And that's when you can take glycine. If you are participating in intimacy, this would be the great time, or you could just do it yourself before sleep as a routine so you can get that entrained. And taking sublingual melatonin, this would generally be, the research is showing that it is around 150 micrograms or 100 micrograms to 300 micrograms. Now, hear me out. Micrograms, right? The supplements that you usually buy at the store are in milligrams. So 1,000 micrograms equal a milligram. So if you're buying like a 1 milligram tablet, you have to break off to a third or even less of that. So it's important to understand that melatonin, the way it works is in a bell-shaped response. It's almost like hormesis, but it's not working on antioxidant response enzymes. So it's creating that perfect amount of melatonin to turn on that clock like we were talking about before. And that's why it's a very low dose. When it gets higher than that, it's a it goes past that curve and it just becomes an antioxidant at that point. And so there are a lot of people, a lot of my clients that I've known who said they've taken melatonin in the past and it does nothing for them. And well, that's because they're taking too much, or they're not blocking out blue light and they're entraining all these other things and they're cutting out their production of melatonin. If you're going to give yourself blue light and take melatonin at the same time, it's a waste of doing that. It's a waste of doing the melatonin. The blue light is going to suppress that clock. It's like putting a muffler over your alarm clock to wake up in the morning. What else? Sleep fully naked in the dark. That's great. If you could wear red glasses to block out whatever wavelengths, or a sleep mask while you sleep, just to block that. So sleeping naked and fully in the dark, what's very interesting, the skin has receptors that detect the light. This is why people who are blind can also have Zeitgebers, light-based Zeitgebers. Not everything has to be through the eye. And now sleep in a cold room, we talked about that before, but keeping it below 76, especially if you have inflammation. So what are some of the biggest takeaways? Thank you guys for sticking to the end of this. What are some of the biggest takeaways? It is 1, be consistent in your daily routines. 2, be active and eat during the day and daylight hours. And 3, when it's dark outside, go to sleep and don't eat. Block out blue light or artificial light. Stay consistent. All right. So